Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is Dritan Nesho, HarrisX founder and CEO. Dritan, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Brittany. Great to be back.
It is a historic day, so I'm really appreciative that you took the time to break this all down with me. Former President Donald Trump has been found guilty on all 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. First of all, what's your reaction to this unprecedented news?
Well, it's certainly historic. He's the first president to also be a convicted felon. He's not the first candidate to be a convicted felon. So I think that as we wait for the dust to settle over the next 24 to 48 hours, we'll see whether anything changes in the political dynamic or if it all stays the same. But certainly an event that has the potential to upend the dynamic of the race, and we shall know pretty soon how voters feel about it.
Before we get to the political impact, I do want to talk more about the trial and the verdict. So, guilty on all counts. What sticks out to you when you hear that verdict? The jury was out deliberating for about 2 days. And in the trial, what are some of your takeaways?
Well, the 34 counts are highly correlated with one another, right? So this was one of those verdicts or set of verdicts that it was either going to be all guilty or the jury is a hung jury and cannot reach any kind of a consensus. Obviously, acquittal was probably the lowest probability scenario out of it. But it doesn't surprise me that it's guilty on all 34 counts. And, it bears remembering that this is the lowest type of possible felony in New York State. And while there is this shock of the 34 guilty counts that's going to play in the media for sure, it's not like there will be jail time attached to each of those counts. It'll probably be up to 4 years for all of the counts altogether in the harshest possible outcome, right? In terms of the sentencing that's about to come down on former President Trump. So I think it bears in mind that in the grand scheme of things, these types of felonies are the lowest kinds of felonies, the types of felonies that it's actually unusual to bring such a big public figure in front of a jury for. But certainly, this is a political season, and there's many different issues that are playing here beyond simply the felony counts.
But does that matter to voters that he's a convicted felon, but the felonies are low? Is convicted felon, is that title enough to turn enough voters off?
Well, polling up until now indicates no, it's not enough. And what we have seen in recent polling, as recently as a couple of weeks ago in the recent Harvard-Harris poll that I've conducted with several colleagues, is that 55% of Americans think that, Trump committed some kind of misdemeanors and would be found guilty. 60% on the other side, though, they think that the process is highly politicized and they don't like the optics of him being judged in a highly democratic jurisdiction like New York or Atlanta, Georgia, right? For some of the other trials that are still pending. And so the optics here are not the best possible optics. And I would very much expect public opinion to react as you would expect public opinions to react. Republicans and conservatives will be riled up by the decision, and they'll probably rally around their candidate. Democrats will be ecstatic for the decision, and there might be a sentiment bump for Democrats. And independents who are in the middle is just another data point that they will weigh, but it's not enough to tip them over. And when we've asked the question previously for all of the trials, if Donald Trump is convicted for the January 6th trials, for the RICO trials in Atlanta, for the New York City trial, and so forth, and we ask each of them individually, the result is 50-50. It's a split horse race. When you ask them, would you vote for Biden or Trump, right? And you introduce that conditional of him being indicted. So I think a lot of this is already baked into public opinion, and we're unlikely to see very strong voter shifts as a result of this. Plus, this is a verdict that will very likely be contested in another court level by the Trump team as well. So I don't think that it will change a lot, nor this is the end of the story for the time being. I think that you'll see the bases react as you would expect them to react, being galvanized on both sides. And, it will contribute to further polarization in our politics, at least in the short term.
We've crossed so many Rubicons with Donald Trump when it comes to his actions, his leadership, everything like that. And now we're really in uncharted territory here. Do you think there's a world in which this is politically beneficial for Donald Trump? Because once the news of the verdict broke, there was a point in time where his fundraising page, Win Red, temporarily stopped working, arguably because so many people were visiting it.
Yeah, it's quite possible that it could help him. Obviously, Trump has played the victim card and has called many of these trials application of lawfare, legal warfare by Democrats. That is the messaging and the narrative that has come out of the Trump camp. I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens with independents, right? It's unlikely for this to really matter to them. Independents are concerned about inflation, the economy, they're concerned about immigration. These are policy voters that are very much in the middle and open to considering both of the candidates as long as the candidates give them something they want and speak the language that they feel they should be speaking. So it's possible he gets a bump. It's possible the horse race changes in Biden's favor, but I would say that public opinion up to now suggests that it's not going to be a big change. It's not going to be a fundamental shift in the trajectory of this horse race and this campaign, which is very tight. And on any given day, it's a toss-up race between Biden and Trump.
You brought up an interesting point earlier that this is just a data point for an independent voter. How serious is this to them? I mean, when you hear convicted felon, I mean, why is that just a data point instead of a complete turnoff?
This is not what animates independents. It's not a key issue for them. And again, voters tend to be cross-pressured by definition, right? They will hear messages from both camps and from both campaigns. Right now, it's very clear that voters are very unhappy with the economy. They're feeling inflation in their wallet and at home within their table. They care about issues like immigration. They want grand bargains and consensuses between Democrats and Republicans, but obviously the parties and their leadership tend to be very polarized. So I think that this will not really move the dial with independents. It might change some minds, but there's a fair bit to go between now and the election, right? There's a full 5 months. And in our last poll, 30% of all registered voters said that they might still change their mind. They're waiting for the debates. They're waiting to learn more from the candidates about what these candidates will do for them. That is ultimately what will decide this race, which will be a very tight race, not necessarily these trials.
These are characters and witnesses we as American people have been hearing about for years. Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels, Donald Trump, obviously. Do you think that familiarity paired with Michael Cohen before lying to Congress, do you think that could be a reason why this isn't changing voters' minds as much?
Yes, I mean, I think that in the courtroom of public opinion, a different courtroom, right? This cast of characters is a very tainted cast of characters. And that's in large part why it's unlikely to change Republican sentiment and even independent sentiments as we think about it. And again, we'll see what will happen. But even if the judge's sentencing, right? It's a harsh sentencing. I mean, people forget in 1920, Eugene Debs, the socialist candidate, was in federal penitentiary in Georgia, and he collected millions of votes, right? So this doesn't prevent Donald Trump from being on the ticket. This doesn't prevent Donald Trump from running. If the sentencing is, home arrest, then that certainly has the potential to impact the campaign. But in today's world, also it's a world of digital media, and you can speak very loudly, even from your home perch, right? We forget that the last election, pretty much the candidates they campaigned from home, both of them. So um, I think that the dust we need to see how it settles. We'll be doing polling together with Forbes, which we hope to release as early as tomorrow, just to see which way public opinion is breaking in that first 24 hours. And then we'll keep on monitoring it. But I do not expect any large changes as a result of this verdict. And as the media cycle dies down, I think that we'll see voters reverting back to the issues that they say that they care about the most, which are largely bread and butter issues.
The timing is really interesting. Right now, we're 5 months away from the election. Obviously, that's a lifetime away, many news cycles away from the presidential election. Since this isn't an October surprise, do you think, that takes the sting away a bit from Donald Trump?
Uh, yes, I mean, I think that none of the other trials are likely to go through before the election. This judgment will be probably contested in appeals court in one way, shape, or form. It's unlikely that that process will be done until after the election, too. So, really, I think what is to be seen right now is how harsh the sentencing is, and whether or not this very tainted cast of characters that took the stand against Donald Trump within this trial really move voters' perception of either of the candidates. I would not be surprised if the race continues to be a dead heat. Uh, the debates, whether they still happen or not, have the potential to change the dynamic. And we have to keep in mind that American voters believe that in the American system, the final judgment, the final arbiter of who's right and who's wrong, and who merits leading the country comes down to voters. They fundamentally believe that these issues should all be adjudicated at the ballot box. So any perception of interference of that process, of the electoral process, from judicial cases like this or any type of cases, is unlikely to be met very positively by voters, right? There will come a point in the next 5 months where voters will say, you know what, I want to hear from both of the candidates. These are the choices that have been put in front of me. And frankly, I want the debates, and I don't want one candidate to be confined at home and unable to join these debates. So I think that ultimately all of this will be adjudicated at the ballot box that voters want it to be adjudicated.
Keeping that in mind, I want to read you President Biden's response. This was posted on X. There's only one way to keep Donald Trump out of the Oval Office: at the ballot box. Donate to our campaign today. So, do
Sure.
you think that this conviction is a W for Democrats?
I mean, look, I think that the both parties are going to fundraise. As I said, it galvanizes both of the bases, right? It's red meat for both of the bases to some extent. Sure, they might have stellar fundraising on both sides. Ultimately, who's going to decide this election is who shows up at the ballot box and who doesn't, which base is the most energized, and those swing voters in the middle, those independent voters who are yet to make up their mind. And I think that both of the campaigns are too focused on their base, and taking too much risk by being focused on that base, because swing voters are fundamentally more valuable than base voters. If you switch a voter from one camp to the other, then you need to turn out two new voters to make up for that voter, right? Because the net effect is -1 on one side and +1 on the other side. It's a net effect of two. So you need two more voters to come out to neutralize the effect of switching someone over. And again, I fundamentally believe, and the polling suggests, that this election will be decided by independents and undecideds in the middle, who traditionally are issues voters. And they make up their mind at the very end based on the issue position that both of the candidates have.
That's really interesting. And I am curious because you said earlier this verdict is more of a data point for independent voters. When they're looking at this, let's say they're looking at this election as a puzzle, this is only one piece of the puzzle. Or since you're saying the issues matter to these voters, how do both parties turn these voters out and get them to say, hey, vote for my guy, despite him being a convicted felon, or hey, vote for Joe Biden?
Well, this is an unprecedented election because both of the candidates have 99% name recognition, and they are ubiquitously known, right? And there's no new information around any of the candidates that can really surface to really change voter perceptions of the candidates. Everything about the guilty verdict, everything about this trial is already known. And everything about both of the candidates on both sides is already known. And frankly, voters don't like either of the candidates, right? When you ask them, do you want Biden to run again or not? 2/3 say no. When you ask them, do you want Trump to run again or not? 60% say no. But the parties are forcing this choice on the voters again. So that's why I think that what will be new for voters are policy prescriptions. What will be new for voters are ideas that will fundamentally improve their lives and deal with the problems that the country is facing: inflation, possible economic turmoil, immigration, crime, and so forth. And those are really the types of initiatives and the types of messaging that is likely to drive the outcome of the election, more so than another fact about Biden or about Trump, which again is very likely to be known already.
If you turn on any news station, if you go on social media, if you visit any website, this is the top news dominating. Obviously, it's historic, it's unprecedented, literally history making before our very eyes. Because this is such a national, international conversation, as a pollster, do you think anything's missing?
No, I mean, I think that the news cycle will run its course and will die down. There's this fascination with Donald Trump. He's always driven TV ratings up, for good and for bad, right? Mostly on his own account. But no, I mean, again, I think that we'll be moving on fairly quickly from this. I'm not sure when the sentencing is expected, but it's likely to be sooner rather than later. And again, the sentencing might play even more strongly than the news that he's been found guilty on 34 counts.
And the sentencing is coming up right before the RNC. But between now and then, what are you looking out for?
Well, I would say that between now and then, it's really the debates, right? And I think that debates has the potential to change people's mind. As I mentioned, 30% are still on a wait and see basis. And this is that coveted middle, right? These are those voters that could tip the election one way or another. In either case, it's going to be very close, similarly close to what we saw in 2020. And the viewers might be reminded that, 2020 was decided by a few thousand or tens of thousands of votes here or there in states like Wisconsin, in states like Pennsylvania, in states like Georgia, and so forth. So it was a razor tight election for a democracy of 330 million people, right? It came down to very, very few votes. And that highlights and underscores how important turnout will be and how important making sure that the voters that are on the fence are convinced one way or another, and they do actually show up in order to make the difference. And so I think that there's still a very long process between now and the sentencing, given that, as you mentioned, it will be right before the Republican National Convention, and a lot can change between now and then. We'll see how sort of the dust settles.
We will definitely see how the dust settles. And when there are new polls, new developments, I hope you come back on, join me, and break it down. Dritan Nesho, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you. Thank you.